Tēnā tātou katoa tātou e tui nei ki tō tātou kaupapa. Tuatahi ake e mui te tīmatanga tō tātou kaupapa mākua whakawātea ai tēnei hononga a tātou. Mākua whakataki ai tētahi karakia kia whakawātea ai tēnei wānanga mō ngā kōrero e whai ake nei. Nā reira, e rauranga tira mā koutou e hono tawhiti, e hono tata ki tēnei kaupapa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, ka karakia tātou. Te urunga tū, te urunga tapu, te mauri tū, te mauri tapu, te mauri te whiwhia, te mauri te rawea, te mauri no hea, no rangi, no nuku tū. Tēnei te mauri ka whakapiki, tēnei te mauri ka whakakake, te mauri o ngā tua e rangi whakaputa ki te whaiau ki te ao marama. Whano, taumai te mauri, haumi e hui e, tāi ki e.
Tai ki e.
Nei rā te reo, mai oha, e tuku mihi atu nei ki a koutou, ki ngā tātai whakapapa o tēnā tātou, e hono nei ki tō tātou kaupapa karanga. Nei rā te reo o toi mai, e mihi atu nei ki a koutou, koutou i whakarangatira mai tēnei kaupapa, koutou whakawātea ai koutou anō, ki te hara mai, ki te whakarongo, ki te tuku kōrero, ki te tuku whakaro, tēnei kaupapa, arā, ko tō tātou pūrongo, e kia nei, e Wao Nui a toi, me tōna hāngai ki te ao o Toi Pāho. Nā reira, koutou, e whai pānga ki tēnei kaupapa, koutou e whakatina nai tō tātou tono, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ko Tama Kirikiri, tōku ingoa, ko au te pau matua o toi mai. Nā reira, tēnā ka mihi ake ki a koutou. Kia ora hoa mā. Thank you very much on behalf of Claire and myself and the rest of the Toi Mai team for making yourselves available to come along to this webinar. We do realise that everyone has very busy schedules, and there's a little kaupapa in Otaki up the road that is pulling at a number of people's heartstrings. In terms of the Māori Land Film Festival. So for those of you who managed to pull yourselves away from that screen to join onto this screen, tēnā koutou. I'd also like to acknowledge everybody in the room who's had a touch on this kaupapa, and in particular Surety and Anton, and the amazing Jeannette Troon, who's sort of kept everybody together and sort of shepherded us all through this process. It's a really auspicious occasion for us here at Toi Mai to be able to host a webinar that's, to tell you all about the whakapapa of Te Wao Nui a Toi and our first workforce development plan that looks specifically at Toi Pāho in the screen industry. I also want to acknowledge all the people, the interviewees, who've contributed their kōrero to this kaupapa. There were a lot of empathy interviews that Simon's going to touch on a bit later that brought out the strong themes that you may have already read in the report, and that I just want to acknowledge all of those people for sharing so freely and for really helping inform us as to their perspective on where things lie in the Toi Pāho space. And I hope that what you've seen in the report and what you'll hear in this webinar will give you some confidence that we're doing our best to find some solutions and recommendations to try and help make the screening industry better than what it already is. And we only have to look at recent results in some gold people awards around the world as to how well we're punching above our weight here in Aotearoa, and that's down to by no means most of the people that have joined onto this kaupapa. Nā reira, koena tāku mō tēnei wā, ka tukou te raka kōrero ki tō tātou tumu, kia Dr. Claire Robinson. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora Tama, and welcome everybody to our webinar. My name is Claire Robinson. I'm the Chief Executive of the Toi Mai Workforce Development Council. And some of you may have come across the Workforce Development Councils before, but Some of you may not. We were established in October 2021 as part of the government's reform of vocational education, and Toi Mai, our Workforce Development Council, is the voice of the creative, cultural, recreation and technology sectors. When we first got stood up, we had 5 staff and no systems or processes. But the needs of the industries were prescient, and knocking on our front door very early on was the screen sector, widescreen sector, the film, television and games development sectors. Post-COVID, or still in COVID, and then looking at post-COVID, looking at how they could access more skilled labour for their industries and for their projects going ahead. So we were lucky enough to access some Tertiary Education Commission COVID-19 Recovery Fund project funding, and we were lucky enough to hook up with Assurity Consultants, who had done 2 other workforce development plans for 3 waters in the electricity supply industry. And together we worked very hard to engage with our sectors through COVID, to gather data that hadn't been collected before, to see if we could find what was happening. And what we were hearing was a misalignment between what was being provided by the education system and what the industry needs. So the report that you have in front of you and that we're going to talk about today is really a result of this engagement and insight gathering. I'm not going to talk much further because we don't have a lot of time for this webinar, but I just really appreciate everybody coming. The critical thing that we want to get out of our sector engagement is feedback about the recommendations. Are they the right ones? Given that the government doesn't have a lot of resources, what should we be focusing on in order to improve skills, vocational education in the film, television and games development sectors? So it's really about the recommendations that we want to put effort in so that we can have a really good plan of action going forward. Anyway, I'm going to hand it over now to, I think, Carol to shepherd us into this next part of the webinar. Over to you, Carol.
Kia ora, thanks, Claire. I'm going to hand straight over to Simon, actually, and I'll catch you up when we get to the questions and answers at the end. I'll be keeping an eye on any questions as they pop up, but we will just save those until the end, and then I'll sort of help facilitate answering those. Over to you, Simon.
Kia ora and tēnā koe, everybody. Yeah, it's just our great pleasure to be able to share this report with you guys, and to have it in this webinar form is going to be fun. We're just going to go through the sort of top level stuff, and at the end we'll have a bit of Q&A. So yeah, to Wao Nui or Toi, the Toi Pāho Screen Sector Capability and Development Plan for Below the Line Workforce. We can skip slides. Yes, we can. So Te Wao Nui o Toi is a report created by Toi Mai, the Workforce Development Council for the creative, cultural, recreation and technology sectors of Aotearoa. And it conveys industry views on addressing the acute shortage of skilled below-the-line production workers in Toi Pāho, which is defined for this kaupapa as the film, television and interactive media industries. So at this stage, I'm just going to hand over briefly to my colleague Anton Matthews to talk a little bit about Te Wao Nui o Toi and the metaphor behind it. Yeah, Anton, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit as well and take it from here for a bit.
Tēnā koe, Simon. Tēnā tātou tuatahira e mihi ana ki a koe i taku tuakana e Tama mōu i whakawāte i te huarahi ki te wāhi ngaro i tēnei rā, nō reira mihi ana ki a koe ho. Tēnā tātou katoa, kei ngā tōtara haemata, kei ngā māhuri, kei ngā pihinga o Toi Pāho, tēnei te uri o Rāhiri, te rarawa kaiwhare, e mihi ana ki a koe tau katoa. Kia ora everyone, my name's Anton, and it's been a real privilege to work alongside Simon, Carol, Tama and the rest of the team. There's been a lot of people over the last few months. It's been a real pleasure to work alongside such a wonderful group of people and be a part of this amazing kaupapa. My role today really is just to give you some context around the metaphor of Te Wao Nui o Toi. So I'll give you a very quick summary of how that came about. A very good friend of mine, Simon Holbrook, and we had the great pleasure of going around Aotearoa and meeting with a number of Māori who are working in the Toi Pāho space. And we got to sit down and speak to them. And when it came time to present our findings back to the Toi Mai board, we decided to present it back through a very Māori lens. And we talked about our findings through the lens of a forest. So we took inspiration from the Māori kōrero tukuiho, te Wao Nui a Tāne, which means the great forest of Tāne, Tāne being the deity or the guardian atua of the forest. Many of you will know that. So the forest, te Wao Nui a Tāne, refers to Tāne's forest. And in speaking with the people that we spoke to in the industry, we felt like what they were describing to us was an industry that was very diverse, that was made up of many, many moving parts that all really needed to work in synergy and in balance with each other in order to thrive and to succeed. And so we thought, well, actually, that sounds an awful lot like a forest. And so we decided to present our findings through the lens of te Wao Nui or Toi, which means the great forest of Toi, Toi being Toi Pāho. And if you think about the metaphor of a forest, you know, it's made up of many, many different trees. Some are native trees, some are introduced, some are very big, some are very small, some have been around for a very long time, so they're the old dogs of the forest, of the ngahere, and some are very early in their growth cycle. Some are just seeds. You know, and if you think about within those forests, you have many kinds of birds. Some have, we have a saying, ka kete kete te kaka, ku ku te kereru. You know, so some are chatterboxes, some have beautiful voices, some are show-offs, some sleep at night. You know, and so we have all of these different personalities represented through manu, through birds. We have lots of ngārara, which are insects. You know, often we don't see the insects, but they're an incredibly important and vital part of the ecosystem. So we sort of thought, well, actually, we can explain some of our findings and some of what we're hearing through the lens of a forest. A forest requires just the right amount of sunlight and just the right amount of shade. It requires just the right amount of wind, just the right amount of rainfall, etc., in order for it to thrive. And we felt like Toi Pāho actually in many ways was exactly the same. There's lots of moving parts, there's lots of diversity, and if the industry itself is going to succeed into the future and fulfill ts potential, then we need to think of it like an ecosystem, like a forest. And whether you're a big tree, a small tree, whether you're a show-off bird, whether you're a tui with a beautiful voice, whether you're a chatterbox, whether you're an insect working behind the scenes that no one necessarily sees, every moving part within te Wao Nui or Toi is vital and it's important. So that's really the where the metaphor comes from. Is that enough, Simon?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Anton. So yeah, just to recap, so it's a metaphor describing this great, diverse, healthy, and thriving ngahere. So it's an ecosystem, and it sets an aspirational state for the Toi Pāho industries. So this was something that we drew on throughout the project, so it allowed us to take a really holistic and this ecosystemic approach to workforce development. So it's helped to influence the way that we set out the strategic goals and recommendations, but before that, also the way that we developed the themes and who we went back to go and talk to again. We sort of, it helped to make everything sort of fit into place as part of a wider whole. So there was a visual identity which we created for this report, and we were lucky enough to collaborate with Graham Tippany. So he is basically an extremely talented, I'm sure many of you will know Graham's work, but he is a multidisciplinary artist from Tamaki Makaurau. He practices as a tā moko artist. He collaborates on branding, architectural work, on amazing urban landscape projects. I think we'll see him as part of the new rail loop that's going on in Auckland. He's in high demand, to put it that way. So we just feel really fortunate to have worked with him. Yeah, Graham basically just loved the concept of te Wao Nui or Toi and the narrative, and saw it as a challenge to bring this to life within a sort of visual articulation, if you like. So we had several online and in-person collaborative sessions between Graham and our own very talented Sanjeev Menon, where they explored a number of ideas and concepts before distilling them down to what we have today. So while we were there, they recorded a couple of working sessions to document the process. So I'm going to show a quick video. It's just totally unscripted, but it just beautifully captures Graham talking about his creative process.
As part of your creative process, where do you start?
Yeah, so we always go back to the real. Always go back to the real and let the real guide us towards what's right, to the right outcomes. And being able to not pick apart, but understand the intricacies of the reo. And that's why te Wao Nui o Toi, te Wao Nui o Tāne, ngā tamariki a Tāne Mahuta e Wao mai ana is another one. And so having that word there tells me that there's a massive environmental thinking that we should be thinking about, not just the plants, but the cycle of life within that environment. Water, insects, bird life, everything that goes with it, even the dead stuff on the ground and how that gets recycled back to earth. The cleaner the dead stuff, the better than the living stuff. So I think that, yeah, using this to Wao Nui o Toi, and then being able to go through each of those other things, rākau, kākano, manu, ngā rara. Not one job is more important than the other. They're all just as important. You get rid of one, then the rest start to fail. So yeah, maintenance across the board. So if we can capture that in some sort of tohu design, using, the rākau work that you talked about earlier here, and then making it pretty, but also, and like I said before, that experience, when people look at it, you want them to not question it, but have a sense of wonder about it. I wonder what they were thinking when. Wonder the cordial that goes with it. I wonder how big the process was to get to that. That to me, I think is a big one.
So here's some of the beautiful results that we had, and hopefully a few of you have had a chance to look through and enjoy this report. Just the way that the visual identity and the metaphor just carries everything through. It's just it's been a pleasure just going through this whole process. So then we go back to the beginning. So why did we do this? Why did we embark on this initiative in the first place? So we know that the Aotearoa New Zealand film, television and interactive media industries, Toi Pāho, provide creatively fulfilling and highly skilled roles, boundless opportunities, variety, well-paid careers and successful businesses. However, the sector is facing significant workforce challenges. We've heard that the ability for Toi Pāho to meet increasing demand for its products and services is being stifled by difficulty sourcing the skilled, below-the-line production workers who make up the majority of screen roles. And that's what this report is about, the below-the-line production workers. So even before we started, we knew that Toi Pāho had indicated a shortfall in their workforce to meet predicted demand for screen content production. There was an observed need for Toi Pāho stakeholders, current crew and entry-level workers to be prepared and positioned to build and maintain healthy careers within predicted post-COVID growth. And there's an opportunity to improve pathways and representation across Toi Pāho for Māori and other underserved groups, including Pacific peoples, Asian, migrant communities, LGBTQIA+, women, tangata whaikaha, and neurodiverse people and others. So in a nutshell, what we've set out to achieve was to convey industry views on addressing the acute shortage of skilled, below-the-line Toi Pāho production workers, identifying skill gaps and industry needs and barriers and pathways for underserved learners. And when we say industry, we're talking about it in the broader sense. So people working within Toi Pāho, but also those around it that support it, like the training institutions, educators. And we also talk to those that were looking at entering into the industry. And just briefly to talk about our process, we really kept human-centered approach right at the core of everything we did here. We did this to develop a deep understanding of the problems, opportunities, and realities faced by people and employers and employees working within Toi Pāho. So we had 75 conversations with everyone from industry experts through to students, industry advocates, studio executives. We studied 42 data reports, surveys, and strategy reports through an industry scan. And we also conducted a survey of 60 Toi Pāho employees and 337 individual workers. And all of this research happened between August and December last year. So a large part of the report is really about the themes and distilling a lot of the information we learned, particularly from the conversations that we had. And these are broken down into 4 main sort of research themes, which I'll share with you now. The first, he wao marama, is making Toi Pāho roles visible, coherent, and accessible. And going back to Wao Nui or Toi, this is where we're introducing those kakano or seeds to the idea of working in Toi Pāho. So those kids that don't necessarily even know about the forest. So nurturing young pihinga seedlings then, who are starting to see the first shoots of their potential within Te Wao Nui or Toi come to life. So some of the barriers that we saw, or challenges that we saw in this area, was the limited knowledge among people outside of Toi Pāho about the below-the-line roles and career opportunities available. And there was a limited understanding of the value of creative and technology careers, full stop, particularly within underserved communities. And we heard about poorly defined and unsupported Toi Pāho career pathways at secondary school level. And just one of many quotes to highlight here. So this is from someone who changed into a film career much later in life. If you asked me at 8 years old what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a writer. It just kind of got squeezed out of me, I suppose. So our second theme, he wao taonga manurere, supporting people to enter and grow within Toi Pāho. So this is where our pihinga seedlings begin to enter Te Wao Nui or Toi, entering the workforce, and are on their way to growing into mahuri or saplings, and onto like older rako or trees where they're beginning to blossom and bloom, the poa waitanga stage. We found that the Te Wao Nui or Toi ecosystem in its current state is not really set up to nurture and protect our vulnerable pihinga. And many do not survive into the stage where they can really bloom and blossom and provide fruit. The key challenges in this area were the limited capacity for industry to provide skilled workers to train and support newcomers. The struggle for newcomers to enter and navigate, especially within the prevalent gig economy. Limited pastoral support available within industry, which is often a shock for people coming out of tertiary institutions, for example. And a little quote here to do with this, this theme. Education doesn't teach you how to start, and game studios can't afford to take you on. So that's a new industry entrant looking for an in into game development. Our third theme, he rako whaihua, delivering training that meets Toi Pāho needs. So we heard that training providers are creating safe greenhouse-like environments that really do a great job of germinating our kakano, our seeds, and growing them into pihinga that are enthusiastic and ready to go. However, we heard that once these pihinga are taken from the greenhouse of education and planted out in the wild in Te Wao Nui or Toi, they are not sufficiently prepared to withstand the harsh conditions that await them. So some of the challenges here. There's a significant disconnect that was observed between the capabilities of Toi Pāho graduates and where the industry need them. We heard about misalignment of training and industry needs, and we heard an urgent need for more industry-supported in-work training. Oh, and lastly here, limited access to short-form courses that can allow rapid upskilling to meet industry demands. And a quote for this one from a major studio managing director of television. Where's the dialogue between industry and the training grounds about where the ebbs and flows of production requirements are? and what the skill sets are short, where the skill sets are short. I've never been involved in a conversation. So the fourth theme, the final theme, is all about mahitahi. It's all about getting together. He ake here tahi kapu oranga rau. So working collaboratively to build and maintain a healthier Toi Pāho. So with this one, we really referred back to the whakatauki me uru kākatea tātou, which encourage us to be like the kākatea ngāhere. It talks about the tightly woven root structures of the kākatea, which grow together in bunches. So when we look at the forest, we see them as individual trees, but underneath they're linked and stronger. So therefore, the uru kākatea becomes an excellent metaphor for collaboration, mahitahi, and unity. So we're talking about industries that work together as the uru kākatea does, so they become much stronger. So the challenges in this sense, we saw that there's still non-standard workplace training and a complete absence of an industry-wide training body. There's minimal visibility on medium to long-term Toi Pāho capability requirements, and a lack of policy to incentivize worker conditions and skills development. And here's a quote from a workforce development hub executive in game development. He was really about remembering it's New Zealand against the world, not New Zealand against New Zealand. So from here, after a lot of synthesizing and working together with the industry reference group and others, we built a set of strategic goals. So 4 strategic goals were outlined, and these were really there to provide direction towards sustainable, inclusive, diverse, and a thriving screen workforce. And the first of these, inspiration for a new generation Toi Pāho, was really about how can we celebrate success? How do we make below-the-line screen careers visible and attractive to young kākano and to those coming in from other sectors? And then secondly, we had accessible and equitable Toi Pāho opportunities. So this is really about creating positive and welcoming industry environments and connecting underserved communities with roles within Toi Pāho. And then relevant and training support delivered by providers in industry is about closely aligning training and education with industry requirements. And finally, mahitahi. So again, about bolstering collaboration across Toi Pāho, education and government. And so we're going to touch on each of these and also the 10 recommendations that fall variously under these strategic goals. So the first one, strategic goal 1, inspiration for a new generation Toi Pāho. And we've just chosen a hero quote for each of these, so hard to choose one. But anyway, here's a screen training Hui participant. The sector needs to tell its story better. Career pathways are invisible, non-linear and inaccessible for many, which hinders the desire for a more diverse workforce. So under the strategic goal, we have our first recommendation, which is TEC to fund and toimai to coordinate initiatives that make below-the-line screen careers visible and attractive to rangatahi Māori, whānau, hapu and iwi, and reflect the diversity of underserved communities. So some of the data on this, we learned that 41% of school leavers desire careers in the creative, cultural and recreation and technology industries. However, only 19% of school leavers actually go ahead and pursue careers in these industries, which is quite some delta when you compare it to other sectors. And from an independent producer and director in TV, to be able to show that diversity needs to come through, you will need Māori and Pacifica storytellers. But that obviously also applies to women, disabled people, the whole New Zealand population, to be able to reflect the different experiences and perspectives of people. And recommendation 2, TEC and MBIE to fund targeted campaigns that celebrate success, promote the value of creative and technical initiative, and enable people to see themselves in Toi Pāho roles. So we need to celebrate success, because the more that people are encouraged to prosper, the more they will hire, the more stories they can tell. I feel like that focus has always been missing from a screen agency executive. And this one from 11-year student was interesting. So we spoke to some school kids This one's like, I'd really like to know more about the game development industry, but I don't know enough to even think about it. I assume you'd need to know how to code. So she was kind of already qualifying herself out of the industry because she assumed that she would want to code, and it wasn't really within her interest. But in actual fact, these days, you know, I think it's far less than half of game development roles require coding knowledge. And third recommendation, TEC and MB to fund and Toimai to coordinate the design of a campaign to attract talent from adjacent industries. And I'm not going to run through all of these, so I see we're running a little bit short, but let's see. I guess some of the most interesting people coming into game dev are people coming in from other careers. So that from a workforce development hub executive and game dev, you know, we heard stories about in game development, you know, like people going out and actively seeking, or recruiters going out and seeking children's illustrators, for example, who would have no idea that they could be working within the game development industry. So there's and across not just game development, but all the different industries, there are there's a wealth of knowledge outside that is brought in. So strategic goal 2, accessible and equitable Toi Pāho opportunities. It's such a fast-paced industry. We need environments where they can break eggs and learn how to make omelets. So that's from a Screen Guild executive. So this is, yeah, really kicking back a little bit, I think, about some of the things we heard about young people or people not experienced in the forest of Toi Pāho, just going straight in and finding themselves a critical part of say a production ecosystem where they make the slightest mistake and it can cause the whole thing to fall over. So we're putting these people into the situation sometimes, which is far from ideal. So recommendation 4, government agencies to support initiatives that connect rangatahi Māori, whānau, hapu, iwi, and underserved communities with creative tech roles in screen. So Māori get pushed into construction, orchards, etc. We need inductions that allow rangatahi to continue a creative mindset within industry. And you note the word inductions is preferred to internships, for example, because it sort of speaks of an inclination to or a desire to keep this person on at the end of their time in this introduction. And down the bottom, a lot of people coming out of tertiary education get part-time jobs. Then it becomes hard for them to be flexible with their work to get experience. So it becomes about people who can afford to be in the industry and monotonous in terms of the kind of people within it. This is one of the things that we heard a lot, is about the sort of inward-looking nature sometimes of recruitment and inequity as well, in terms of the potential for people to be able to enter the industry, say, without having to have a part-time job. So recommendation 5. Toimai to introduce work-based learning initiatives that create positive industry environments where diverse voices can thrive. So there's nowhere rangatahi can go while they're at school to experience industry professionalism. It's about capturing before they leave school. So when they leave, there's already a direct pathway for them. That's from a producer, an independent producer on TV. Oh yeah, and we just heard about some amazing initiatives that people are doing off their own backs. This studio director in game development already brings a set number of rangatahi in for 3 to 6 months per year so they can learn. It's a big commitment that will not be possible. There's actually not be possible to continue without funding. And then just going on to our next strategic goal, relevant training and support delivered by providers and industry. Nobody wants a person who can talk about film. They want someone to be useful on set, especially the below the line stuff. The only way you can do that is with practical filmmaking and doing it again and again. And this is from a training faculty lead in film and television. So it brings us to recommendation 6, TEC to direct funding to programs that align closely with industry and industry requirements. So where's the dialogue? I think we had this one actually. So what's lacking, second one down, is the ability to apply training to a practical environment. Providers need to partner with the sector to have a decent and robust connection. The industry needs to come forward and meet in the middle. It's just absolutely pivotal. So that from a production studio executive. And we heard this a bit and from industry, but here we're also hearing it from a course director in game development. We take studios to a certain point, but there is a gap to where studios need them. And, you know, we heard frustration that, you know, a lot of these people that are running courses, they find it hard enough to discover what the future needs of the industry are. And then when they do, they often have to jump through certain hoops to get the right funding from their faculty or from their department to actually then go and upgrade their facilities or change their courses, which can take an amount of time. By the time it's done, the industry has moved on. So there are still some crucial things to address here. So recommendation 7, Toimai to endorse and TEC to fund targeted training that supports underserved communities to build Toi Pāho careers. So cultural safety is something that we really need to work on. We're a bicultural country, and the more diverse workplaces become, the more awareness there needs to be about holding each other's mana. This doesn't have to be an ethnic group talking about cultural safety because it applies to everybody. So that's a filmmaker and screen diversity advocate. And just skipping to the bottom, we had a great example in the Centre of Digital Excellence in Dunedin. This person, what I really love about Code is that from the very beginning, they wanted partnership with Māori involvement. They wanted to work with local iwi to achieve those outcomes. And indeed, we heard amazing stories of Code going out, hiring buses to go out and bring rangatahi from more remote communities in to do game jams and really just open their minds to some of these new options and pathways to them. And recommendation 8, TEC to widen its criteria for provider funding to include pilot funding for non-NZQ QCF listed, industry fund and delivered short form courses and stackable micro credentials that are flexible, nimble and meet immediate industry needs. So this is all about the short form stuff, getting things done quickly. So we heard from a film producer, people who have completed shorter term courses are quite hands-on and practical. And when they come out of it, they understand what's going on. They understand they're going to start at the bottom. Whereas a lot of those longer degrees, people are like, I've graduated and now I'm a director. So yeah, and another here, community management game development. There's not enough scaffolding to get juniors up to seniors, so they need to learn overseas. And indeed, we heard many people in the industry who had to spend a lot of money going out to short courses in Australia, for example, or further afield, which creates equity issues of their own. So a final strategic goal, mahitahi. New Zealanders are amazing in our ability to think creatively and sustainably. Our geographic isolation has meant we've had to think differently. We've got to find clever ways of doing things, which translates into our creative capacity, and that from a training faculty lead in film and television. So our second to last recommendation. Industry, toimai, and TEC and MB to investigate the potential merits of and help define the purpose of Toi Pāho's nascent initiative towards creating an industry training body. Let's go to the bottom one here. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. A good example exists in the form of Screen Skills in the UK. Its role is not to be a provider, though it might run some very targeted courses. Its job is to be a conduit for information and the vehicle that enables consensus across the needs of the sector, the providers, the government, and the funding organisations. Its role is to say what's needed. And just one thing to stress here is that while Screen Skills is a great example, you know, there was a sort of, people were unanimous on that we can take that as an example, but we need to build something that is truly fit for purpose for Aotearoa. And recommendation 10, toimai to work with industry towards establishing a medium and long-term workforce capability pipeline. This is all about visibility. You need the industry to tell you specifically where they see the gaps. If they've got incoming production and need 300 people, that data needs to be captured so we can start to do something with it. So that from a production studio executive. And the industry is changing all the time, and the technology is changing all the time, and there's a need for training to be nimble to fit the needs of industry. By the time we've agreed to something, the industry has moved on, as we touched on before. So that from a veteran producer and set ready trainer in film. So that's the recommendations. And at this stage, I'm just going to have a quick run through of kind of the purpose of why we're here today, well, to share this work, but also to talk about industry feedback and consultation. So Toi Pāho industry members, i.e. You guys, the education providers, you guys, are invited to give feedback on the report's goals and recommendations until the 10th of next month. Feedback will inform the final recommendations and advice to the Tertiary Education Commission for investing in vocational education and training for Toi Pāho careers, and to MBIE for its support of the sector. And importantly, it will also influence the future work of Toimai and how it will work to support the sector. And there's a link on the screen which you probably can't click on, but I think Carol might just pop a link up in the chat as well, so that you can bookmark that. And this is where, if you haven't already seen it, you can download, read the report, and then also give your feedback. And Horeaki nei, next steps. So we'll collect and consolidate your feedback. And then we're going to work to also, as a part of this, build a collective view of which initiatives are currently in play, and also talk about new ideas on how to action the recommendations. We're looking to provide advice to TEC about its investment of Toi Pāho, as we said before, and also provide advice to MBIE on its wider work. So that will happen. And this all funnels into an action plan and roadmap to align industry and workforce training all the way through to 2032. So with that, I am going to hand back to you, Carol, and we're going to see if we can have a bit of time for Q&A.
Thanks, Simon. That's fantastic. So just to recap, I have posted links in the chat to the landing page, which has a link within that to download the full report. There's also a super summary there if you just kind of want a two-pager. And but we do encourage you to read the whole report. And there's also a link on that same page which will take you to a few short questions that we're keen to get your input on in terms of that sort of consultation phase. So we please welcome your feedback, so we can the team at Toimai can help prioritise. There is just one question that I can see at the moment, but feel free to add any more. I will just, Alex just asked, he noted that it had been, sorry, I'm not sure if Alex is a man or a woman, I shouldn't assume that. Whether it's being recorded, and it is, and that'll be posted on the Toimai website as well, probably in the next day or so. Also, we have a question from Cassandra, just asking about what are the successful New Zealand companies such as Weta, Cerebral, etc. doing to help with this initiative? Really good question. We spoke to both of those companies as part of the research. I'm not sure if Simon, I think you may have spoken to them specifically, or perhaps Claire, if you wanted to talk to that. Simon, did you want to sort of offer any comment on that initially?
Yeah, we had some great conversations with Cerebral. Those guys are just champions of mahitai. So they were very keen and provided us with some great insights and some nice photography session as well. But I think what they really gave, particularly to the game development space, was this willingness to collaborate. You know, the real sort of New Zealand against the world approach. You know, there's enough for everybody to eat in an industry that is, you know, 90% export focused. But yeah, they were very much keen to continue down that track and supported this initiative. Does that answer the question in some way?
Thanks, Simon.
Carol, I'll also add that Anna Middleton from Weta Digital was in our industry reference group, so they're completely on board with this. And then one of the next things is really, once we can get government and industry into the room together to be working on whichever action points we we go down, then yeah, the big industry players will be in the room as well.
Mm.
Can I jump to Doug's question, Carol?
Yes, you go ahead, Claire.
So in the chat, Doug Easterly from Victoria University has put a question about universities. The problem is, Doug, that the reform of vocational education has deliberately excluded universities from any of these initiatives. So the workforce development councils are only able to work with providers and industry up to level 6 essentially, or sub-degree programs at level 7. So you kind of have to, unfortunately, take our insights and do with them what you will. But yes, the universities and TEC have to work out their own funding model issues separate to this exercise. I'd love to be able to include universities within what we're doing, but we've been told to stay away.
Mm. Yeah,
And
we did have.
And Marg asks, are the recommendations in order of priority as they stand at the moment?
No. So they've been designed around the Te Wao Nui or Toi metaphor to grow from the ground up. But actually what we want is for you to say, actually, recommendation 9 is more important than recommendation 1. So that's that's what we want from you at the moment.
And Sandy asks, not sure if it's something that you'll know ahead of the budget, but has the government's reprioritisation of its work programs, the effect of the floods and Cyclone Gabrielle, had any influence, or will it have any influence on the timeline or the investment support that was originally envisaged?
No. So our primary government agency that we're dealing with is the Tertiary Education Commission, and so their investment funding isn't affected by the floods and the cyclone. I can't tell you whether MBIE will be adjusting its funding prioritisation as a result.
And Lawrence asks, following on from the TSC funding, graduate success ratings for the polytechnic sector did not include fixed term or part-time work. Is the gig economy going to be recognised in regulations?
Again, we're not. So we are the voice of industry in this space. All we can do is pass on your requests to TEC and MB. We don't have any power ourselves to identify whether the gig economy can be recognised in regulations. But we do have quite a bit about the gig economy, don't we, Simon, in the report?
I could pick up on that a little bit. We really talk a lot in the report about the need for education to prepare people coming into Toi Pāho for working in the gig economy. So really building their business skills and providing with the tools and know-how to work within it. And it works in two ways. One, it gives them a better chance of succeeding when they get into the industry. And should they not succeed in the industry, then they've built up some business skills which they may be able to apply elsewhere.
Any more questions at this stage? Nothing further on the Q&A. No, things seem to have gone quiet. So shall I hand back to Claire and Tama to close?
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Anton, for being here and for being part of the webinar. And thanks for everybody who's joined in, because it's such an important piece of work for us. It's our very first sector-specific workforce development plan. We're really happy with the work that Assurity has done developing it, and we really want it to be spread far and wide. So could you all please circulate it amongst your industry networks so that we can get a really good feedback. And the more that we get, the stronger your feedback on those recommendations, the more we will be able to press these points with the government. So we're very conscious that this is not the first report that's been done on workforce gaps, skills gaps in the screen sector. But at least we have some hope that there are some resources out there at the moment that we can start to tap into to actually see some effect, some change. So please provide your feedback. We don't have an agenda, toimai. We are really your voice in this reform and vocational education space. So please feedback around the recommendations to make them stronger. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tiara. Thank you, Jeannette, for organising everything from our end. And I will pass it over to Tama to close. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Claire. If I might just endorse everything that's been said so far, a particular acknowledgement again to everybody that's given up their time to firstly read the report and secondly to come along to this webinar. To risk sounding like a broken record, please share far and wide. The more input we get to making sure that our recommendations have the pointy end of the stick pointing in the right direction, the better. I runga i ra o ngā kōrero ko kōrero tia e tātou. Ka mihi anō ki a tātou a whareki hea nei ngā whakaro. He mihi hoki ki a koutou, a surety koutou ko Anton, nā tō tātou kaupapa i kaukau mai. I kaukau mai ngā kōrero, tātai ka mahitahi i a mātou ko toi mai ki te puta tēnei pūrongo. He mihi anō hoki ki a koe Jeannette, kōrero ko Tiara, me tō tātou kei whakahare a Claire. Nā reira, me mihi ka tika ki a koutou e noho nei ki roto i tō koutou whare, hari ahara nei, puta noa te motu. Ka tiro atu au ki waho i taku matapihi, ka kaha mai a tamanui te rā, he tohu pai te rā, o ngā tohu huarere a, he tohu pai anō hoki mō tēnei kaupapa. Nā reira, tēnei ka mihi ake ki a tātou i runga i ngā tuahuatanga kua tuitui ai tātou i tēnei ahiahi. Nā reira mā koe whakataki ai tātou karakia kia o whakakapi ai tēnei hononga ipurangi nei, i runga i te whakaaro kia pai te toenga o tō koutou rangi, aha kua ka noho koutou kihea. Nā reira ka karakia tātou, kia taunga manakitanga o te mea ngaro, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou kia māhea te huma kihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori, kia tūturua o whiti whakamaua, kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tā ki e.